you very much, everybody, and welcome back. I am now being joined by Matthias Homann. And Matthias Homann works for SAP. He's going to be talking to us about integrating mid-market businesses into multinationals. And when I was talking to Matthias earlier this week, back end of last week, I asked him why does he enjoy post-merger integration so much? And he said, well, actually, it's because it's so broad. It's everything that happens in the business, but in a really short period of time. And that he usually gets involved about 3 months before deal close. So there's a good handover from the due diligence team, which is great. And his final line, and I really enjoyed that from a post-merger integration perspective, was that he said, the way I profile myself to the organization that's coming into SAP, and I'm going to quote this, is, I'm your concierge, I'll find you a solution. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Matthias.
Thanks for the roses. Challenges in integrating mid-market businesses into multinationals. A bit more of an introduction to me. I'm not sure if I get an echo currently. All good? Okay. So Matthias Homann, I'm now 12 years with SAP. Before I was in a consulting company belonging to BMW. So a bit consulting background, then moved to operations, and then my former CEO asked me, hey, we have an issue in an integration, can you help out? And that's how I ended in the last 8 years in the integration business. I'm leading a small team within the sales support area at SAP that's focused on post-merger integrations, focusing on go-to-market, which means everything around strategy to operations, working with IT, the line of business, and the target on the post-merger integration phase, and we come into play, like Gaby said, 3 months before the acquisition so that I can get myself warm up, ramp up the projects. I will give an overview about M&E at SAP in general, why are we doing this, how are we set up, and then move into the integration, the challenges that I see per deal type, and also then, especially when it comes to mid-market, and what's my thoughts on how improve this. I will not give an overview about SAP, I think. Is anybody not knowing SAP? Do I need to do an introduction? Okay, thanks. M&E at SAP, it's used as a key enabler to drive growth in the past. I think in the last year, since 2010, we bought about 35 plus companies across all sizes, from very small ones to big ones. I come to the D types later, always with a clear focus on growth. So we want to expand our portfolio, we want to grow the revenue, and that's why we buy them. I understand other companies, I don't know, Shell, IBM, or others, or manufacturings might have different deal type scenarios. Ours is clearly growth. It's never cost consolidating or buying a competitor to get rid of. It's really about, hey, this is a cool solution, this is a good team we want to buy, we want to scale, we want to expand our footprint. There were some major acquisitions, like in the past Sybase, that was when I came into play, database, which brought me into why I'm standing here now. SuccessFactors, most of you might know. And then last big ones, Qualtrics in 2019, when we acquired the company and then started a divestiture and IPO again, because we realized it's much better to do it again outside. You always find a good story to justify this. And then recently, end of last year, Emasis, which is a tuck-in acquisition, also about the cloud, into an existing line of business to replace an existing solution. And very recently, which currently is my baby from a go-to-market point of view, Signavio Business Process Intelligence, to then make this a success, or support to make this a success in SAP. And then AppGyver is a very small one just recently. It's really then a technology tuck-in. Cool team, 10 people. We want to suck them in so that they can help to make a success. Which brings me to the type of deals we have. And just a side note, if you have a question, just raise your hand. and then I'll answer. We very simply say we see 3 deal types: game changers, portfolio extensions, and technology tuck-ins. Game changers is really the big acquisitions, the big companies we want to buy, 2, 3, 4 billion or even more, that continue to exist as a separate line of business. It's still, from a formal definition, it's a tuck-in, but it continues to act as its own line of business. The backend is integrated, HR functions, F&A, etc. But from a sales, from a product team, it's kept separate. Let me go to the bottom. Technology tuck-in. There's a cool technology. There's a cool set of bright people that we want to get hold of to complement our portfolio and then buy them. And then we have the portfolio extension. So there is a company where we usually then also have a revenue business case, which we don't have at the bottom, which we definitely have at the top. But in the middle, it's a revenue business case. There are synergies. We want to keep the team. And then depending on the type of acquisition, it's integrated into an existing one. It's kept somewhat separately, always with the business case behind it. And which if I look at the title of this presentation, Mid-Market Companies, this is where we talk about mid-market deals. A mid-market company has a decent size, 200 to up to 1,300 employees that we want to integrate to create synergies. Any questions so far? No? Good. And if I'm too fast, Robert or Gabby, give me a hand. Usually I'm too quick. Challenges in integrating. And first, a disclaimer. I liked someone, I think it was Carlos, if I remember, I'd say, hey, this is not based on a study. This is not a university thesis or something. So this is not coming from a huge consulting company that have interviewed 100 people. This is based on my experience with some research. I mean, I'm now in that business about 7 to 8 years. I've been involved in 10, 15 integrations, something-ish. So this is Matthias Homann's personal point of view, first of all. And the second is from a scope. I really want to focus on challenges when it comes to mid-market. So what I'm not going to tell about is what are general challenges, success factors for M&A, like you need a true North Star, you need to do it proper due diligence, and how do you set this? For me, this is addressed in the previous presentations, kind of common knowledge. So let's focus really on, specifically from mid-market, what does this mean? So if you look at the deal types and their challenges, very simplified view, Matthias Homann's view. If you look at the game changers, it's a huge organization. It's very complex. It's too big to fail. And I think it's a bit, sometimes you have the risk of executive's baby. This needs to be a success. I think Daimler Chrysler was a favorite story, where the board said, or one board member said, I need to have this, and everything is rushing. The complete opposite, technology tuck-in, it's not complexity. I think if you did something wrong, you bet on the wrong product, you bet on the wrong team. The challenges with mid-market for me is I try to find a catchy phrase is corporate swallow small. How do you ensure that the secret sauce is kept, that the team is kept, so that it can fulfill the business case? And something very pragmatic, big versus small, typical mid-market company, 50 to 300 million revenue, 200 to 1,500 employees, one line of business, a handful of countries, not very small, but still compared to huge multinationals, small. It's private, maybe public, and it's pragmatic, it's agile. It's, I think, a few presentations before, so this startup culture is in there. And then you have this whale of a multinational who has multi-billion, who has several 10,000s of employees, who have multiple line of businesses, who have more than 100 countries, i.e. SAP. We are present in 140-something countries. It's public listed, so GAAP, IFRS, etc. applies. It's basically, how do you prevent that small gets being eaten up by big? So let's now look into this, the challenges I see. And also a bit of a story before. If you see those lines, a colleague in the corporate development department had done a research, a very pragmatic one, and then they realized if you look at the big ones, this is a red line. This is basically from a business case performance, usually okay. But if you look at the small tuck-ins, the mid-sized tuck-ins, you have a high risk that after 1 year or 2 years, the curve goes up and then the interest goes down for various reasons, which I would like to elaborate. Now let's look at the challenges that I see, which comes down to 6. First of all is complex corporate processes. GAAP, IFRS, deal approval structures, purchasing structures, so all those shall now be applied to the acquired company. So how do you avoid that they are not overwhelmed? I don't have an easy answer here. I think the only, which I come to the recommendation later, is that if you do the due diligence phase, you need to try to be very conscious about, hey, how much of a risk is this when we buy that company? You want to, simple example, for a couple of years in sales, we weren't allowed to purchase MacBooks. This is a bit of a conflict for a startup who loves Macintosh and others. Number 2, dilution of the secret sauce. I think, Laurie, you mentioned secret sauce. So it's always to be very conscious along the whole integration phase, from the very beginning until when the integration starts, along to make clear what is the secret sauce of the company. How does the business model, the culture that this mid-sized company has, how does this fit, and how do we avoid that we slash it and dilute it? I think for a very small company, if you have 10 or 2, this is a bit like of the, let's say, a microcosmos where they can maybe preserve the secret sauce. If you have a large tuck-in, a large game changer company with several thousands, they are big enough, they have mostly direct access to the board and immediately tell to you as an integration lead, hey, if you don't do this, I call the CEO. I mean, I had this in an integration years ago where we went into the workshop and the acquired company had a very good connection to the CEO, and we heard the rumor that they just called Hasso-Plattner because they were not satisfied. This won't happen with a mid-market company. They're not on that present critical. So this constant trying to look into in the beginning, but also then along the process. Integration workload. Mid-market integration does not mean that the effort becomes smaller. If I look at my workload capacity together with my small team and the others of a big integration of the types we do compared to a mid-market, it's nearly identical. This might change for others due to cost consolidation, etc. But if I look at the growth from a go-to-market point of view, you have the very same topics always independently if it's a 500 people company or if it's a 2,000 people company. And this needs to be then reflected also in the staffing, in the ramping up of the project integration phase. Number 4, loss of sales focus. If I go back to this small fish versus whale side, you buy this company that has a specific product focus, one line of business that is focused on a specific set of countries. And now let's take SAP as an example. SAP is a sales machine with, I think, roughly 13,000 AEs. And they are now sucked into this. How do you make sure that you don't, as long as you try to scale up, that you find the right balance between how fast do you want to grow aggressively, but how still not overwhelm the others, the acquired sales team, so they're confronted, basic example, with so many leads that our AEs throw them over the fence and that they actually miss into really closing deals. And this is a challenge not only that you need to think of as part of the business case, but also then in real life to have a constant eye, this staying in contact then with the mid-market company, with the team. Hey, how do you feel? Are you overwhelmed? Is there anything I can help? If you have an issue in the region, let me know so I can either contact the AE directly or that we agree with the COO or CFO on the SAP side to send a note to a reminder, hey, this is the focus, and if there are any other problems, come directly to me, and then we escalate. Number 5, loss of attention after 8 to 12 months. I mean, for me, and this is again, my focus is integration. Most of you are more in the early phase, would love to get your thoughts. Then usually we buy a company and there's a lot of hooray and honeymoon in the first 6 to 8 months, and then the topic is gone. You go back to daily work. Yes, you maybe do your post-integration audit reports, but usually then the attention drops. How do we make sure that they are big enough so that they still, even on their own, can survive in this huge universe of a multinational, instead of then, if they don't make the numbers or if they have issues, that nobody cares anymore. And number 6, which we stumbled into a couple of times, is that there was a tuck-in acquisition which looked very nice, but then actually the reason why that tuck-in acquisition was bought was to band-aid issues that the receiving line of businesses had, which we from an integration team weren't aware of. So then all of a sudden your kind of sweet spot mid-market integration is hit by issues that are a level above on the overall line of business that you then realize usually 3 to 6 months after the integration close, and it's basically you cannot turn around. So it's really then from an integration team to really have a keen eye in the line of business to see and have your eyes open in the line of business, then whether is there anything that might impact that the line of business itself struggles that impacts the acquisition itself. I mean, question to the audience, do you see other challenges? I think I have ample time still. Anything to add here? Did I miss a key point?
I was just going to add, Matthias, on the size of the business, because it's just, the small company in the whale, it's often the deal size as well. So you have a smaller deal size than an average deal size in the whale, and that deal size is a problem for the new specialist sales force coming in to try to get the attention of the big sales force.
Yeah, absolutely. We had exactly this with an acquisition. If I go back 2015, Multiposting. Multiposting was a bit a mid-market integration, but a bit biased towards tuck-in, where it was a solution how you can quickly post job recruiting offers, job offers into websites like LinkedIn, Monster, etc. And they had a sales machine, but very small deal sizes, 10K, 50K, 20K. Our AEs are used to 100K, 200K, 500K. They have a quota of 1.5 million and above. So there was no kind of this transition time between a sales team, which was worthwhile, but actually the functionality was bought. So how do you make sure that you now bridge the time until the functionality is properly integrated and have the sales team transitioned over with all the challenges you might have? Maybe they don't want to get a generalist as an example. How to bridge this? Well, that's a good point to have a look at also at the deal size. Yeah.
Perhaps a quick question or observation from my side. When you're looking at mid-market companies, you'll probably also see situations where in some countries, actually the mid-market company might be bigger than SAP might be. Have you come across that at all?
Let me think. Not for the mid-markets. I think the challenge that you have is let's say the go-to-market strategy of the acquired mid-market, especially when you move then into next year planning, that maybe their focus differs from the regional market unit focus you have on the SAP side. I mean, we had examples with someone in the HR IT space where we then spread the budget, and then the mid-market company, the acquired one, tried to make the number, but in countries like France, Belgium, and others, on the SAP side, there was no budget assigned, because it was not a focus for them for that topic. So this is how then you need to align in the business case to make sure that this is somewhat properly reflected, but especially then when the budgets are defined by controlling, that it reflects the capability, the priority of the mid-market company as well on the multinational side. Which we often, my personal observation, I don't know if it's company specific or if you have other experience as well, that sometimes what's driven out of go-to-market from a business planning budget point of view, come up with your go-to-market strategy plan, and then apparently you have controlling that then cascades down the numbers, and then the budgets have already been rolled out, and you realize, well, this doesn't fit. Yep.
I just wanted to pick up on the point 2 on the dilution of the secret sauce. Is it diluted purely because the acquiring company's processes dilute it, as in they just smother it? Or is it that they don't really know what the secret sauce is? Because it is a complex set of ingredients, as you said, with processes and people and products and culture and everything else. Is there just not enough thought put into what that secret sauce is actually made up of? Or is it that they do know what it is, but they still smother it anyway?
Yeah. Do I need to repeat the question, or does the online, do they hear it as well? No, it's okay. So in an ideal world, you do the due diligence 150% and you think of everything. So usually you should be aware of, hey, this is the secret sauce. And so this is in the ideal world. But I think in reality, things might slip through for 2 reasons. Either is you basically do not think about this, or you don't have the time to do this. I mean, I'm in the relaxed integration phase time, so I can look at the colleagues in the early phases who do the due diligence, say, hey, do your work, I'm happy to consult. But I understand that usually in the due diligence phase, you're under much time pressure, that things might slip through. And we had one example. Let me give you 2 examples. Fieldglass and Emasis. So Fieldglass 2014 Fieldglass is a cloud software for managing contractors, external workforces. How do you recruit them? How do you calculate the cost, etc. Fieldglass, we acquired them, and then Fieldglass came up with, I mean, this is 6 years ago. No, yeah. We learned our lessons now. Hey, we do consumption-based billing. SAP was not ready for consumption-based billing. Our model was on-prem related, you pay us a license fee, or subscription related, you pay us upfront. And all of a sudden, they came up with their secret sauce. No, we deploy LACE, land, expand, consume, and adopt. We sell the software, and then we agree roughly on how the customer will use the software more and more. And then he will start paying, and we were not ready for this, which was a huge problem. They, in the end, survived with their secret sauce because we bought another company shortly before, Concur, and then they were assigned to, so they had enough power to continue with their secret sauce until SAP was ready. And Emasis, a bit similar, they had a key portion. So Emasis is a solution, a marketing cloud solution for hyper-personalization. And they are strong also in the backend process with so-called metering. So very in-depth measuring how is your cloud software used on the customer side. And our systems, our processes, the big whale was not ready for this. And if you're in a corporate big company, if you want to initiate a big project, it takes a year up to 2 years how to realize this. You could easily say this is now slipped through the due diligence, which I think is too easy because the teams are always under pressure. So it's then more than a lessons learned. How can you prevent this, that something similar happens in the next business case? No. Okay. So what are my recommendations in an ideal world? And I would separate between what can be done before the integration, before deal signing, before deal closing, and during the integration. I think before the integration, it's really about this, have an eye on, are there from a mid-market integration point of view specific risks that you might run into when assessing a target? Like the question related to the colleague here, the secret sauce fit, does it really fit? Also, is the size after 1+ year, is it critical enough if we then do it somewhere integrated? And let me give an example. At SAP, we have 14 line of businesses, and then they're integrated in another. And how to avoid that they are just noise in the company? So is it really, has it a sufficient size? And also, how do we handle with the risk of churn, and what's the impact? I think on a big company, you still have churn. On a very small one, you can address it also more directly. I think in the mid-market companies, that's my hypothesis, I think the way how to manage to avoid churn risk is much, much more complex. Second one, strong power couple setup for the integration project team. We always try to set up kind of a twin approach per work stream, cascading down across all the project levels. There is on the SAP side, depending on what kind of area, the subject matter expert integration lead, and then there is assigned then on the acquired company side, always with this concierge approach. And then prioritize integration approach. I think also then trying to already in the business case prioritize, which might be hard. I think the reality is always that the board says this needs to go faster. And then the surprises come maybe then 8 months later or 12 months later. And then last one is to think about this incubation period. We usually foresee 1 year incubation period to leave the team alone, intact, so that they can get used to it, and we also can learn, and then it's integrated into the receiving line of business. I think sometimes 1 year is not even good enough. You might think about 2 years. Yeah, there's a question.
Who's accountable for the business in the incubation period?
Sorry, can you say again?
Who is accountable? Who's in charge of the business in the incubation period?
Okay, so for the online audience, the question was who is in charge for the incubation period? I think we can differentiate between two types of integration works. One is that if it's a line of business tuck-in, then it's still assigned to the line of business, the mid-market company, but the organization, the structure is still the same. So the receiving line of business is still accountable for the overall business results during this incubation, which they would be anyhow. If it's a separate one, it's a bit tricky. But usually there is a home where this team is assigned to the whole company. So then, for instance, if I look at our recent acquisition, Signavio, it's kept until end of next year separate in incubation mode, and the whole organization, BPI, where Signavio is included into, reports directly to our CFO. And then afterward, the discussion will start where to integrate them. So these were thoughts on prior to integration. During integration, this is a bit where my heart is, this listen and be the concierge. And also point number 3, execute a nuanced empathic integration approach. I mean, for me, it was a lessons learned with the recent integration. I don't know how colleagues who are involved in integration, how you are. Usually I'm pretty, let's say, annoyed if you have a acquired company that has very good connections to the board. Because you always need to say, okay, what do I say? No, if you, okay, then let me go to, if I take SAP, let me go to Christian, because I'm not okay with that. On the other hand, it was for me a lesson learned to say, hey, if you're working in a big multinational company, you're used to your SAP routines, how the things are working, and now you want to buy a company with their secret sauce. So I think it's always helpful then to be reminded that, hey, we bought them for a specific reason. And it's good for them to challenge the status quo and to do this constantly, whether it's how to compensate people, how to set up territories, how to align accounts, how to handle back-end processes, because especially at least my hypothesis, if you're in a big corporate, you're becoming part of the problem, you're becoming part of that big whale. And now you want to buy something that shall move the needle. So always have this at least in mind to listen, and then you can decide instead of first saying, no, this is not how we handle this. So this is 1 and 3. Number 2, even I think during an integration phase, it's always prioritizing. I see myself with this concierge kind of nuance is always that if you look into the rest of the SAP organization, of the multinational organization, they basically usually come with the attitude, hey, we bought them. This is how our process is. And we need to do this now. And you need to concentrate and kind of be the advocate for the acquired company / the business case to say, hey, does this help the business case? If not, it's pre or B or C or D. Assist the acquired company to challenge, I just talked about this, and then ensure focus is kept following the focused business case. I mean, I had a situation with an acquisition where 2 scenarios. One is a mid-market company, and then in the business case, it was basically we expand into the whole world, which doesn't make sense. So you need then a bit late in the game, but still you have then changed to say, hey, when we start the integration, can we please have another look at the business case and prioritize the countries? Still making the numbers, but at least get more focused. And the other scenario is that you have a focused business case, and then the integration work starts, and then when you do the next year planning with the other line of businesses, with the regions, then they want to boil the ocean with the help of the acquired company. So you need to then kind of have a strong voice, be the advocate, and say, no, this is our sales motion. This is what we want to stick to. Yeah.
So during the incubation period, do you sense an impact on attracting employees?
Sorry, can you say again?
So during the incubation period, do you sense an impact on attracting talent? Because they are in that incubation period, but they know they will be kind of swallowed by a bigger company. And they might be attracted by that secret sauce, but that changes, of course.
I think the biggest risk I see is if you don't have a clear answer already, what happens after the incubation. I mean, I talked to one of a recently acquired company who's still in incubation, and who, after the acquisition, his post-sales team lead left, and now he needs to hire someone. And he is currently really struggling because he says, Matthias, I'm trying to hire now, but everybody's asking, what happens after the incubation period? Will I still be there? Will I be sucked into somewhere else? So this is really a struggle. And I don't have a silver bullet. I think this is something you basically need to take into consideration.
This may sort of come back to the secret sauce question, but one of the things that we see a lot is when a big corporate is buying a smaller organization, the smaller organization either loses or is seen to be losing some of its differentiator in terms of its customer intimacy, its ability to tailor its approach, which then can result in a loss of customers, either because the acquired company does become worse at that or is expected to become worse at that. Is that something that you've seen? And if so, how do you tend to address that?
Let me think. I haven't seen it directly, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's happening because you have your, I don't know, well, if it's a sufficiently big enough mid-market company where we have some overlap, so there are some, I don't know, BMWs or other somewhat decent, big enough companies that you already work with, then I think you don't run into surprises. The problem is if there are customers that SAP has nothing to do, which then falls by us into white space, and it is not part of the go-to-market plan of our priorities on our side. So it's then more, I think, something you need to address in the business case, that how does their segmentation, their focus market look like? How does it fit to ours? Yeah.
I'm curious about when you're acquiring one of these mid-market companies that has we say a technological platform that's interesting, how you play that out. And I'll give you two examples in your history. One would be Ariba, and the other would be the company SmartOps. So with SmartOps, I think you've integrated within your own offering, but thereby SmartOps would no longer be available to people who don't use SAP as a platform, whereas Ariba, I think, is available to players. But would all of that have been planned well in advance in the due diligence and integration cycle, or did it just evolve that way post-acquisition?
So, I mean, I was a bit involved in SuccessFactors because it's big, not SuccessFactors, Ariba. It's actually, yeah, Ariba is on that slide. I was involved in the 2 years later in the overall integration. So, I mean, Ariba is big enough. It's a technology platform. It's now part of the business network kind of division that SAP has set up. So this is something where it's big enough to say, this is our future, we build upon this. I was not involved in SmartOps. I think here it might be that at that time, 2013, the technology might be worthwhile, and then 2 years or 3 years later, it was realized, I think it was a wrong bet. We shift sunk cost. GE portfolio assessment, do we still need it?
Matthias, that's a quick question from my side. You mentioned that in the integration phase, listening is really important. Can you give an example? How do you listen, and who are you listening to at the organization that you're acquiring?
I liked the slide from Laurie about how to, what was it? Distance versus, what was the other one? So you have those Zoom meetings, your board meetings, etc. And trust. And for me, it was a bit a changing moment in the past, I don't know, 8 months. I mean, it's still Zoom time, WebEx time, we use Teams. So for me, it's this, and I'm a very structured person, studied mathematics. So if I solve a solution, I come up with a plan and with a structure and process and approach the team. So I would be this process manager type. Where I then realized, hey, how can I really stay on the, here on the knees, sit on their knees and say, hey, let me help to understand you, let me be present. So try to be not only setting up those bi-weekly, weekly, whatever work stream calls in a bigger round, in a smaller round, but also say, okay, ideally I would like to be on site, which currently is a bit difficult, or at least try to be part then of their QBR meetings, of their team meetings, etc. for 2 reasons. First of all, I really understand what's going on there, which I wouldn't in the normal workstream status calls. And then also sometimes topics come up about integration in their team calls, in their small ones, in their middle ones, so that I can immediately say, give an answer about, hey, haven't thought about this, let me be your concierge, pick this up, this topic, or clarify, because also sometimes there are completely wrong perceptions in the acquired team or in the line of business. So this is how you stay contact. Really try to be part of their team, of their calls, of their events.
Hi. For us, if you look at the secret sauce and what has a big impact, it's often implementing our ERP solution in these types of companies. So I'm curious, does SAP have a secret sauce on how to minimize the impact of these types of changes in companies that you're integrating?
No. No. I mean, of course, if I look from a portfolio SAP, what are we selling? We are selling across all segments. We have our solutions for the big ones, for the medium ones, for the small ones. But this is now actually where the challenge is. You are now the big company. Simple example with a CM system. We have one big CM system, which is based on our technology. And now they have their tailored one. And we now want to make sure that account alignment, to bring the teams together, pipeline transparency, that we link them. We don't have an easy answer there, no. And I think there is no easy answer. It's basically, it comes to the, and I make my life here simple, saying, hey, dear M&A deal team in the beginning, include this into a risk assessment. I know it's difficult, but to say, okay, how feasible is it really that if we buy them, what risks appear if we integrate the systems?
Matthias, on chart 11, do you not see people retention as a challenge?
Yes, if you buy a company where the whole, for instance, the leader themselves said, okay, I just want to buy it. I keep it for 2 years and then I leave. This is one example. The question is then, does it really make sense to buy them if the key head of the companies will leave in 2 years? What happens with the rest? Does this fit to your strategy? And then also from a culture point of view, I mean, we buy also startups that are 3 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, but still have this agile, and then you run into it, you are acquired now by SAP, and then the people start leaving. Absolutely. I don't have the official data, let's talk about data, but absolutely.
All right.
Good.
Thank you very much, Matthias. There's no other questions online,
Okay.
no other questions in the room. I think the retention question is one that of course always comes up. We did, by the way, do some research recently. Don't beat yourself up about it. Startups and smaller scale-ups, the people that are there, they just move quicker. They just leave earlier. They're not used to corporate life. So when they join corporates, we get all wound up because they leave early, but actually that's what they normally do anyway. So thank you very much, Matthias.
Thank you.
I think you got an extra long round of applause because I forgot for Philip earlier.
To the HR, to the topic, retention topic. Luckily, I'm in go-to-market, so I look always as the HR colleagues then to say, okay, come up with a retention plan.
Thanks very much, Matthias. We're going to cut the feed for a minute, for a couple of minutes, to set up for the next presentation, and we'll be back in 4 or 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone.